It seems like some people, organizations, and governments are hell-bent on bringing down the Catholic Church. The question is, how do you expose opposition to the faith and to the truth? And while they say what you don't know can't hurt you, everybody needs to know about the hidden forces prowling around the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Guess that's where we come in. Follow me. Hello, I'm Michael Voris, and welcome to this edition of C.I.A. Catholic Investigative Agency, a program where we reveal the hidden and not so hidden attacks on the Catholic Church. In this episode, we will reveal some hidden methods that the powerful Rockefeller Foundation is using to bring about the meltdown of the Catholic Church. In fact, by the time this episode is over, you will be shocked to hear how the Rockefellers quietly invaded the church through one of the most iconic Catholic institutions in the United States. But first, our thesis. The Rockefeller Foundation is actively undermining the Catholic Church and in the process attempting to erase man's natural orientation to the eternal. So, let's begin. With the Rockefellers, it is very definitely a family affair with many faces. Before we examine their present designs on the world and the Roman Catholic Church, we need to look at their humbler beginnings. The first Rockefeller to emigrate to America was Johann Peter Rockefeller, a kind of founding father of the clan in the New World, who emigrated from Germany's Rhineland to New Jersey in 1708. One of his descendants was William Avery Rockefeller, born in 1810 in Granger, New York. Known as Doc, William was a traveling salesman and horse thief who sold bottles of crude oil door to door as a cure for snake bites, impotence, and warts. In 1849, at the age of 40, when he was already married with 6 children, William was accused of raping a 15-year-old girl in New York and fled to Cleveland, Ohio, to avoid prosecution. At the age of 45, he abandoned his wife, Eliza, and their 6 children, marrying a 20-year-old by the name of Margaret Allen without divorcing Eliza, thus establishing himself as a bigamist. Margaret Allen proved not to be enough to quell his appetite for women, as he also took up with a third woman, his mistress, Nancy Brown, who bore him 2 daughters. One of the children of his original marriage with Eliza was John D. Rockefeller, and it is this John who will become the famous, or infamous, robber baron billionaire of Standard Oil. John's mother, Eliza, was a strict Baptist who had some rather unusual ideas about raising her children, albeit in an atmosphere of infidelity and abandonment. When John was bad, she would tie him to a fence post and beat him when he didn't do exactly what she told him to do. This childhood may have influenced his psychological makeup, perhaps inculcating in him a desire to control and manipulate his surroundings and his relationships, both professional as well as personal. So this is the family into which John D. Rockefeller Sr. was born and propelled him into big business and even bigger power grabs for the Rockefeller clan. Interestingly, his fortune hunting is said to have been inspired by his Baptist preacher, who once told him to make as much money as possible and give away as much money as possible. So John D. Rockefeller Sr. came into his own, bore into the oil business, co-founding Standard Oil with his brother William Jr., and the rest is history, as his company quickly made tens of millions of dollars through the oil business, transportation, and many other ventures. Of course, it would be later on that he would be worth billions. His manner of doing business was efficient, cost-effective, and controlling, quickly making a reputation for himself as master strategist, as he gobbled up competitors and formed a massive monopoly over which he was supreme ruler. He enjoyed other people's toil, and watching the dollars pile up was once famously quoted for saying,
"I would rather earn 1% off 100 people's efforts than 100% off my own efforts."
Having established the Rockefellers as the chief family of the dynasty of American robber baron families, his son, John Jr., took up the torch of the family business in 1897 with designs on even more important matters, such as controlling and manipulating the fate of mankind. His tool for this would be the dark science of eugenics. His schemes and plans put him at odds with the values of the church, viewing man as nothing more than an enlightened animal, soulless, and therefore in no need of salvation, which of course means no need of a Catholic Church. It was John Jr. who first brought the subject of eugenics into the family. While studying at Brown in 1894, the young Rockefeller wrote a paper called "The Dangers to America Arising from Unrestricted Immigration," in which he denounced immigrants as, quote,
"the scum of foreign cities, the vagabond, the tramp, the pauper, and the indolent, ignorant and hardly better than beasts."
He sought to rid the planet of these through the science of genetics. Rockefeller did this by giving money away to organizations that supported and advanced his views. The Rockefellers' initial foray into the field was the establishment of the Eugenics Record Office at Cold Spring Harbor, New York in 1910, furthering Rockefeller's support of eugenics research and his racist convictions. 3 years later, the crown jewel of the Rockefeller family was established. The Rockefeller Foundation was founded in 1913 when the New York State Legislature passed an act on April 24th incorporating the foundation. Now, the foundation would evolve into an organization that would infiltrate some of the most important structures of American Catholicism, but more on that later. The Rockefeller Foundation's statement of purpose read, quote, "to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world," end quote. And with the foundation incorporated, John D. Rockefeller Sr., who was the organization's founding father, made gifts to the foundation totaling $35 million, followed a year later by $65 million. Adjusted for inflation, that would be nearly $2.3 billion in today's money. With the foundation, his dreams became bigger, and while money couldn't solve everything, it could buy control of human events. The secretary of the foundation at its beginning in 1913, Jerome D. Green, said this in a memorandum describing the foundation's principles and policies. The foundation's work is to, quote,
"go to the root of individual or social ill-being and misery."
This established a rough framework for the foundation moving forward. At a first meeting of the board, a longtime advisor to John Sr. by the name of Frederick Gates argued that, quote,
"disease is the supreme ill in human life."
The general concept, therefore, of health became established as a foundation priority and would be the basis for later designs on world government through population control and climate change initiatives. But in June of 1913, the Rockefeller Board laid aside its first money, $25,000, to create the International Health Commission, which launched the foundation into the area of health on a global scale. Health, in fact, came to have a very broad meaning, as the foundation also helped establish the American Social Hygiene Association to direct the scientific study of biological and social factors that influence human sexual conduct. These early years set the course of the Rockefeller Foundation to the present day, and though the Rockefeller Foundation may not exactly call it eugenics as in the past, it is still very heavily involved in social research. This interest is revealed by the Foundation's ongoing support for the Bureau of Social Hygiene for some 20 years. The mission of the Bureau was to research and study social ills such as prostitution, as well as provide information in birth control, maternal health, and sex ed. The Bureau finally shut its doors in 1940 as the family set its sights on other venues for social enrichment, such as population control. In 1952, the Population Council was founded by John D. Rockefeller III, grandson of the robber baron and son of John Jr., who had become a eugenics enthusiast. In an effort to separate the council from the negative connotations of eugenics in a post-World War II world still reeling from the horrors of Nazi death camps, the word eugenics was dropped and replaced with the euphemism of population control. The council also fostered the development of contraceptives and the study of the social sciences to increase the use of contraceptives among the general public and eventually all Catholics, who at this point were the major opposition to contraception. Some contraceptives available today were developed by Rockefeller's Population Council. These include the copper T IUD, Norplant, Jadel, Norplant 2, and the Mirena IUD. However, increasing the use of contraception among the public was not enough for Rockefeller. He knew that the greatest obstacle to the universal use of contraceptives, not to mention his plans for a global government, was the Catholic Church. In 1973, after Nixon's Commission on Population Growth and the American Future, known as the Rockefeller Commission, failed to expand abortion and contraception in America, John D. Rockefeller III lamented, saying,
"The greatest difficulty has been the very active opposition by the Roman Catholic Church through its various agencies in the United States."
As we've observed, the Rockefeller eugenics agenda would prove to be a very effective means of manipulating and controlling society. However, the Rockefellers knew it would not be enough to bring about their plan of a global government. They needed the public to want that government. In order to bring the United States and ultimately the world under their influence, the Rockefellers decided to effect change. The foundation firmly grasped the importance of forming young minds to its worldview, so it set out on the long course to slowly bring about the necessary changes, and its first target was higher education. The Rockefellers began their insidious hijacking of the American education system by funding a number of institutions. First, there's Spelman College, founded in 1881. Its goals include, quote, integrating and globalizing learning. Next up, the University of Chicago, founded in 1892, was the platform used to rend education from its medieval, read Catholic, foundations and prepare society to accept values other than those taught by Christ and his church. This was the earliest beginnings of the rejection of Western civilization's Christian roots on an educational level, and more specifically, Catholic roots. And another, the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, founded in 1901 and renamed the Rockefeller University in 1965. It was intended and has continued to be an epicenter of pharmaceutical research and essentially creates the contraceptive industry. John Sr. also collaborated with the American Baptist Education Society to establish the University of Chicago, where his now well-developed definition of education took shape with the help of Dr. John Dewey, a scholar from Johns Hopkins University. Through Dewey, Rockefeller adopted the theory of behavioral psychology that best fit his aspirations for remaking our system of education. Dewey's educational philosophy can be summed up as, knowledge and truth aren't important, but teaching students to be docile followers of a new world order is the goal, a kind of socialization. This fit hand in glove with Rockefeller's plan. Rockefeller, through Dewey's theory and practice, was setting himself up to educate generations of children, solidifying the Rockefeller influence on the social order as the God in the machine by heavily influencing thoughts and feelings. After 100 years of the Dewey educational theory, many individuals have surrendered their free will in exchange for immediate gratification and a governmental nanny state, a kind of bread and circuses mentality. But Rockefeller was not content with influencing the American education system alone, but wanted to showcase his educational theory on a global stage. Nearly from the beginning, the Rockefellers have been exuberant bedfellows with the United Nations, yet another tool helping them to move the world toward a global government radically opposed to the worship of Christ. In 1902, Rockefeller established his General Education Board to further promote the agenda of global control. Rockefeller established his General Education Fund 2 years later, and it was renamed the Rockefeller Foundation in 1910 and chartered in 1913. During the 1920s, Rockefeller's General Education Board became the International Bureau of Education, and after World War II, formed a partnership with the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization known as UNESCO. The first Director General of UNESCO was Sir Julian Huxley, and the author of the 1946 UNESCO, Its Purpose and Its Philosophy. Listen to what he has to say about the aims of UNESCO.
The moral for UNESCO is clear. It must envisage some form of world political unity, whether through a single world government or otherwise, as the only certain means for avoiding war. Specifically, in its educational program, it can stress the ultimate need for world political unity and familiarize all peoples with the implications of the transfer of full sovereignty from separate nations to a world organization.
Thus, the United Nations educational arm was, from its inception, part of a plan to create a one-world government, eradicating the rights of the individual in favor of those of the collective group. Now, coincidentally, Sir Julian was making his preposterous claims in the same year that Alfred Kinsey published his first of two reports, so-called reports, entitled Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, made possible by funding from, you guessed it, the Rockefellers. Kinsey's science claimed to prove that large sections of the population often engaged in a variety of sexually deviant practices. Kinsey's work was a huge source of impetus for the sexual revolution that would occur 2 decades later. As you can see, through a diabolical singleness of purpose and enormous wealth, the Rockefeller cabal has continued to promote a moral, social, and governmental structure radically opposed to the tenets of Catholicism regarding human sexuality and free will. The Rockefellers formed young minds, in effect, creating a clean slate, ready to accept the social and sexual revolution of the decades to follow. The Rockefellers sought to increase the use of contraception and abortion by persuading the general public of its benefits through the government and education system. But there was still opposition, major opposition, that had to be confronted, and that opposition was the Catholic Church. For this reason, Rockefeller, toting his money bags, set out for South Bend, Indiana, and set in motion what would be the largest wholesale betrayal of Catholic principles and faith in American history. At the time, perhaps no other institution in the United States so strongly represented Catholicism as the University of Notre Dame. Steeped in lore and tradition, it was emblematic of Roman Catholicism for 5 decades of Catholic immigrants. The success of its athletic teams vaulted the small school onto a stage of prominence and respect. For many American Catholics, Notre Dame represented nothing less than the Promised Land. This is why what happened at Notre Dame in the 1960s is the primary source and example of betrayal to the faith, orchestrated by then University President Father Theodore Hesburgh and continued by his successors, Father Edward Monk Malloy and now Father John Jenkins. In the early 1960s, John D. Rockefeller III approached Father Theodore Hesburgh, who was then president of Notre Dame, and asked about the possibility of Notre Dame hosting a population council meeting at the university. In 1962, Father Hesburgh invited Rockefeller-funded Planned Parenthood to hold a number of so-called secret conferences at Notre Dame through the intervention of Father John O'Brien, head of the theology department. Former Notre Dame professor and editor of the website culturewarnotes.com, E. Michael Jones, offers these observations about the university's wholesale betrayal of the Catholic faith as part of a self-absorbed trading of souls for foundation funding.
Where the Rockefeller interests want Catholics to use birth control, and Catholics like Hesburgh are looking for foundation money. They know that Rockefeller has a foundation of its own. They know that all of the big foundations, Rockefeller, Ford, they're all interlinked. And if you get approval from one, you get approval from all of them. And so out of this, the secret conferences at Notre Dame are born.
These conferences were kept very quiet and only advertised to the most friendly of potential guests. Rockefeller needed a Catholic in the camp, so to speak, and he found a willing one in Father Ted Hesburgh. Father Hesburgh sold out Catholic higher education, and specifically Our Lady's University, for a share of Rockefeller's millions and the accompanying worldly respect. And there was plenty of it. For starters, amazingly, Father Theodore Hesburgh actually served on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, as well as holding other important positions on the board over the course of 20 years, the same organization that is a leading proponent of the culture of death. But that wasn't all the worldly acclaim Father Hesburgh amassed. He became the director of Chase Manhattan Bank, was given 150 honorary degrees from various universities as of 2004, the most by any person in history. He was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Richard Nixon and the Congressional Gold Medal by President Bill Clinton. How is it possible that a Roman Catholic priest sat on the board and was the director of an organization that supports birth control and abortion? It's a question whose answer reveals all. Once Notre Dame, the leading Catholic university in the nation, sold out, Practically every other Catholic university quickly followed suit. With population control money pouring into the coffers of Catholic universities, the plan could proceed to advance contraception and abortion as tools in population control. And Catholic universities played an impressive role in warping the minds of young Catholics and steering them away from the truth. That's why today we live in a nation in which 98%, catch that number, 98% of Catholics, not Protestants or atheists, Catholics, use contraception. It was this relationship between Hesburgh and the population control Rockefeller Foundation that perhaps more than any other single alliance in recent church history which began the meltdown of the past nearly 50 years. And with these secret conferences on population control going on during the summers of the early 1960s at Notre Dame, it soon became clear that a more definitive break with the Catholic Church and her teaching would have to be initiated by Catholic universities. In 1967, the year before the papal encyclical Humanae Vitae, which restated Catholic teaching condemning contraception, was released, Notre Dame administrators, under the direction of Father Theodore Hesburgh, released what was known as the Land O'Lakes Statement, in which they distanced themselves from Catholic teaching. The statement was named after the retreat center of the Holy Cross Fathers, the order that founded Notre Dame. The retreat center is a luxurious hideaway in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. While at this quiet summer conference in July of 1967, Father Hesburgh and others prepared for the overthrow of the Catholic faith at Notre Dame. But Hesburgh's initiative would not stop at the confines of his South Bend, Indiana campus. It spread like a blazing inferno to virtually every other Catholic college looking to unshackle itself from Rome in exchange for money. In releasing the Land O'Lakes Statement, Hesburgh's Notre Dame aligned itself with forces bent on the destruction of Catholicism, such as the Rockefeller Foundation, with whom Father Theodore Hesburgh plotted to reduce the Catholic voice in society by indoctrinating the faithful with the world's creed. In part, the Land O'Lakes Statement was little different than Martin Luther's declaration announced in Wittenberg, Germany 450 years earlier, declaring, "I will not serve." Listen carefully to the defiance of this quote from the document.
The Catholic University today must be a university in the full modern sense of the word, with a strong commitment to and concern for academic excellence. To perform its teaching and research functions effectively, the Catholic University must have a true autonomy and academic freedom in the face of authority of whatever kind, lay or clerical, external to the academic community itself.
The Land O'Lakes Statement is important because of the atmosphere it created, making rejection of church authority sound sophisticated, intelligent, up-to-date, and thoroughly fashionable. It laid the groundwork for widespread and wholesale academic dissent, which would explode a year later at Catholic University of America, with specific regard to the birth control issue and Pope Paul VI's encyclical. Hesburgh's Land O'Lakes Statement and the explosion of dissent against Humanae Vitae went hand in glove. It was perceived by the public, as it was intended to be, that if a larger-than-life Catholic icon could challenge Rome, then everything was up for grabs. It has proved to be an attitude throughout the Church in the West that has not dissipated in the following 40-plus years and still often emanates from our pulpits and chanceries today. And it's important to bear in mind that these wheels were set in motion by the designs of the Rockefellers and the cooperation of Father Ted Hesburgh and his Notre Dame. With the Catholic academic world now unhitching itself from the authority of the Church, the Catholic world was now readied for wholesale rejection of sexual ethics. When you've got more money than you know what to do with, what's left to achieve? How about world domination? Some believe that's exactly what the Rockefeller dynasty wants. While it's difficult to say what their true intentions are, we can certainly judge by their actions and statements that they, along with an elite group of politicians, aristocrats, and billionaires, desire a world united under some form of global governance. Here's an excerpt from current family patriarch David Rockefeller's memoirs.
For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro, to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal, working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global, political, and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it.
As you can see, Mr. Rockefeller seems to have no concern for his own country's best interest. He proudly admits that some kind of one-world government would be ideal. If David Rockefeller is working against America, the most prosperous country in the history of mankind, one must ask the question, why? While this country has its flaws, certainly, it is also the same country that provided Mr. Rockefeller and his family the opportunity to make their fortune. What kind of government would he replace democracy with? Would he do away with capitalism? Well, we don't know the answer. We do know that Mr. Rockefeller is appreciative of a type of governance that is diametrically opposed to democracy. He speaks candidly in a 1973 New York Times article about China and the success of communism.
Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded not only in producing more efficient and dedicated administration, but also in fostering high morale and community of purpose. The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history.
Keep in mind that Mr. Rockefeller is speaking favorably about a system that is responsible for the deaths of at least 40 million people in China alone. In contrast, the Catholic Church has words of condemnation for communism.
This all too imminent danger, venerable brethren, as you have already surmised, is Bolshevistic and atheistic communism, which aims at upsetting the social order and at undermining the very foundations of Christian civilization.
We've looked at what the Rockefellers have said about world government. Now let's take a look at what they've done. Their publicized involvement with organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the United Nations, and the Trilateral Commission establishes them as key players on the global economic and government scene. What is less known is their involvement with groups aimed at creating one world religion. This Rockefeller initiative, nearly a century in the making, is an attempt to bring together different faiths into one. With all things the Rockefellers are involved with, one must question their motivation. Was it to bring about peace and harmony, or to shoot down any religions or beliefs that stand in the way of their global governance goal? In 1919, John D. Rockefeller Jr. funded a new ecumenical organization, the Interchurch World Movement, or IWM. Its stated purpose was to foster peace after a bloody World War I. It sought to achieve this by consolidating the various denominations into one religion. And while this particular organization only lasted a short time, it began the idea of consolidating religions and the watering down of their dogmas into one. It's interesting to note that Professor Charles Harvey, who wrote a history of the IWM, said that the roots of the modern-day social justice gospel can be traced back to Rockefeller's interchurch world movement. The current understanding of social justice is that we must completely focus on solving all worldly needs while sacrificing our eternal needs. The torch and the Rockefeller funding was passed on to the Federal Council of Churches. Today, the World Council of Churches carries on that same mission with the help of the United Nations. And consistent with the Rockefellers' past support of this movement, they funded the World Council of Churches' gorgeous Ecumenical Institute in Switzerland. Not only do they support combining all religions into one, but you'll find in what can be called their mission statement that they support, you guessed it, one world government. Climate change is another issue in which the will of the Rockefellers is exercised wholesale through their various organizations, including the Foundation. Politicians within the family ranks have helped to form and promote legislation to reduce or even eliminate dirty practices that supposedly contribute to climate change. Stephen Rockefeller, a fourth-generation family member, played a major role in writing the UN Earth Charter in the late 1990s, which points to overpopulation as a major detriment to our ecology, not to mention our social and economic systems as well. The Rockefeller Foundation makes the following statements.
Human actions have degraded ecosystems more drastically in the last 50 years than in all of history. And we are promoting awareness and guiding funders and policymakers to support broader action on climate change resilience, nationally and internationally. to help poor and vulnerable people around the world. Specifically, the foundation partners with governments, other foundations, donors, NGOs, and groups from the private sector.
The Rockefellers individually have also been involved with climate change and subsequent legislation involving the reduction of greenhouse gases. Phil Rockefeller, a state senator in Washington, had the following to say.
I worry a lot about climate change. I think it is the single most important environmental issue that we face.
Jay Rockefeller has made the following statement.
Greenhouse gases are not health for the earth or for people, and we must take significant action to reduce them.
Summarizing the Rockefeller philosophy perfectly was David Rockefeller while addressing the United Nations Ambassadors' Dinner in the late 1990s.
Unless nations will agree to work together to tackle these cross-border challenges posed by population growth, overconsumption of resources, and environmental degradation, the prospects for a decent life on our planet will be threatened.
As we've seen earlier, the Rockefeller Foundation is heavily involved in the contraception movement. The Rockefeller Foundation and the Population Council have produced a variety of contraceptive methods because their underlying belief is that human population must be curtailed and limited to end the problem of climate change. As a result, the Rockefellers continue to inject tens of millions of dollars into the political machinery to bring about their world vision. The Rockefeller family, through various funding efforts, power grabs, and influence peddling, has made itself an enemy of the Catholic Church. The Rockefellers have extended their tentacles throughout the world, influencing public opinion in favor of their global agenda. The Rockefeller Foundation may paint itself as a social help agency put in place to assist mankind, but don't be fooled. The Rockefeller Foundation has an agenda that is deeply in opposition to the Catholic Church and her teachings. So now you know. Thanks for watching this edition of C.I.A. Catholic Investigative Agency. I'm Michael Voris. Let's hit the streets.